let's see. We talked about photographers. Photographers, I used to get really jealous with photographers because they don't have this prep work that we have. You know, it's like we have this 2 to 3 week, if we're lucky. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 3 days, to a day. You know, we have this 3 weeks of prep and requests and negotiations for clothes and all this stuff that's going on and our assistants and our research and calling everybody and casting and just this insane process. And they're like making a phone call here and there and like, right? And they're doing things, and so we get on the shoot, but then I realized like the photographer's whole back end, their post-production is what our front end is.
The model. So,
what'd you say?
It's the model.
The model.
They walk in and then they leave.
I know it's the model that has it easy. Luckily, our career lasts a lot longer. So, so with the photographers, it's like key to having a successful shoot is empowering the photographer. There's just no way it's gonna work unless you can empower the photographer. Like they are your #1 partner. And if for some reason, whatever, they feel like they're being thrown under the bus or they feel like they're being creatively stifled, your images are gone. Like it's out the window. And that was like a huge lesson that I learned. And I actually didn't make that mistake, but I watched it happen a couple times when I was assisting and things like that, where it's like the photographer and the stylist wasn't getting along and the images just turn out crap. And the whole thing gets canned. The whole project, the whole editorial goes right into the trash can.
You email each other before? You talk to
With photographers?
Yeah.
So the question was, do I email before with the photographers? Yeah, I mean, what I like to do is the minute I'm commissioned, if I can, I'll meet with them. So with Editorial, sometimes the magazine editor lets me choose my photographers to work with, and sometimes they assign me photographers. Like with Love, I'm often assigned. Like, oh, you're gonna work with Patrick de Marchelier, or you're gonna work with Sylvain Sansbo, or like that. And in that case, I get with either the photographer or their producer and get them all of my inspiration. The minute I have those inspiration presentations done, research presentations done, I get them over there. And we have a meeting if we're both in town, or we have a phone call, pretty much from the beginning, because I don't like to start prepping until I've spoken to the photographer. Because you never know, they might have some crazy set idea they're doing, and if it's like with Ellen, I was shooting with this one photographer for Italian Vogue, and we were shooting a celebrity, and it could have gone so many different ways, how we were gonna style it, how I was gonna style it. And so I called her, and she and I had to have like 3 or 4 conversations about inspiration before I could even get my head around the story we were gonna do. So they can be like really amazing collaborators, and I'd like to bring them in from the minute it's commissioned and confirm that the 2 of us are working together, I start the conversation. Because the longer you have to think about it, and the longer they have to think about it, and I can also push them. Like we're definitely, we don't just inspire our clients and like magazine editors, we also inspire the photographers. And the more we can do that, the more valuable we become to them, and the more that they want to book us for their money jobs, and for other great editorials. So I like to start the conversation with them the minute it gets commissioned. And then we'll talk about storyboards in a second, but I always do storyboards of all the looks that I'm getting, and I send those to them too. Just so because then they just really feel like part of the process, and it's easier.
And when you say you want to empower them, do you mean on the set you improve what they do?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've found for me that the photographers like to have a partner, a creative partner while you're working. Because it's really easy when you're working by yourself to get into like a bubble, and you kind of start to lose what you think looks good. So, have you ever had that happen? It happens to me all the time, right? That's why it becomes really important to have that partner where you're aligned on the inspiration and the story you want to tell, and you sit back with each other and you say, okay, are we telling the story that we said we want to tell? And just being in the dialogue, the exercise of being in the conversation completely changes it. It's great. And it's so inspiring. And there's a couple photographers that when I work with them, I just love it because we can just go back and forth, and we're able to build on these ideas and create these images that I've been able to work with some people where we create some images that I still love, even though they're like 3 or 4 years old. That's not super old. Even stuff that I did at the beginning of my career, that I'm like, I still love the pictures because of the collaboration we had. And I think some stylists, I've observed that some stylists will just do the clothes and like step away and kind of like hang back and not talk. Huge mistake. Huge. Because,
For example, model poses and who decides. I
yeah.
haven't been in a lot of shoots, but usually the photographer calls the poses.
Yeah, well, sometimes the stylists do too. I mean, I've been in this situation quite a few times where like, oh, okay, and I'm starting to become, it's like, I feel like such a weirdo, I'm standing behind the photographer going like, it's like, oh, try, and then they're like, but the model gets it, and that way, and then the photographer's so happy because, all of the stuff they have going on technically that they're dealing with to take care of and da-da-da-da-da-da, and they're shooting it. So it only becomes more powerful as an image when the two of you are working together. And like I said, the best stylists in the world, they are right there with a photographer. They're like in every picture at the monitor, and they're and they're fixing, and them and their assistants are fixing everything. But they're also like, well, what about the they're looking at the hair, they're looking at the makeup, they're looking at the angle of the face, they're looking at the light. Like, oh, what about this light? What with the light on the hair, it's a little bit too much. And I mean, and it's hard, right? Like it's hard to I don't want to say criticize. It's hard to give feedback sometimes and not have someone feel offended. But I've found that when they realize that you're making the picture that much better and that you're just taking care of them, and it's a lot in tone, and I've had to learn it, man. I had to learn how to, it's like kid gloves. When you're handling them with kid gloves, but you're still also like, you don't let them get away with anything, really. So it's a huge skill, and it's like the courage we were talking about earlier, where sometimes it's like, I'm working with someone like Patrick, it's like, I'm not gonna sit there and babysit and tell Patrick that he needs to change the lights. Are you kidding me? But I'll maybe suggest another location, and then we'll reset something up, and it ends up working better. So there's ways that you kind of handle situations to take care of people and their egos, because you're definitely dealing with that, especially in fashion. You're dealing with it with photographers and art directors on shoots. You're dealing with it with the magazine editors, and you're dealing with it, because I also had magazine editors tell me ideas, and I'm like, I can't do that. It's like, how do I nicely say, oh, that's not really my cup of tea? It's like, how do you, it becomes an art. And everyone has to do it in their own voice, And I grew up in the South, and my mother, I had to go to like manner school. It was totally like etiquette. It's called cotillion. Yeah. It was awesome. But my mom always says, she's like, you gotta, I was like, I was always like, I don't want to go to manner school. Are you kidding me? But I learned so much about this, like all these funny like debutante Southern sayings, it's like you catch more bees with honey. And so that's always what I think, but it's so true. It's like, if you sit there and you're telling someone that you completely want to change a picture, like a photographer, if you say it so sweetly and just show them how much you care and like holding their shoulders and like, oh my God, I really think we should do this instead. They're totally cool with it. Like they'll move with me because it's like, I really want this to be the best shoot ever. Let's scrap this and do this. And they're like, okay. And they might be a little pushback, but I just stay like, it's gonna be great. And because it's so, like in the beginning I was more like, oh man, like this looks like shit, we gotta do something else. And that doesn't work. It's like shooting my toes off one at a time. And it's the same with the hair and makeup teams too. I mean, it's a little bit easier that if like hair and makeup isn't quite your thing, like if you don't like what they're doing, sometimes you can retouch it and fix it later. Sometimes, you can do the hair yourself, which I've done a couple times, like where you just get your hands in there and make it look like what you want. But with photographer, it's a whole different thing because he has a completely different skill set than we do. I mean, unless you're schooled in photography and understand, like I don't understand aperture and shutter speeds and lighting and not the way they do. It's like I do the fashion background and inspiration and research, and that's what we do, and they have this technical domain that I don't even want to get into. So that's what, and I respect that with them. So it's a fun but really important collaboration. And like I said, like once you find someone you really love, like you start, like I always love Polly Mellon has done some great interviews lately, and she was talking about, she was a stylist for Vogue in the 80s. And 80s into the 90s, I think, Polly. She might have started in the 70s, actually. She was so major. She did a lot of the really famous Richard Avedon pictures, like of the naked woman with the snake. You know, that was all like Polly. And she was talking about, it was, you know, a lot of it was coming out of her collaborations with the photographers. She worked a lot with Helmut Newton too. She did some iconic imagery with Helmut Newton. And she was like, you know, she was like, none of them wanted to work with me in the beginning because I talk a lot. She was like, which I can totally relate to. But Polly said, you know, once they started trusting me and realized how much I care and how much I love what I do, and she was like, it was hard because I'd have to sit there and try to keep my mouth shut, but they would, because they were collaborating, it's like, oh, she, you know, because verbose people like us, right? Like, we'll be like, let's bring in a snake, you know, and then suddenly you get this iconic, amazing image that, you know, that, I mean, that's one of my favorite images Richard Avedon ever did. So hearing Polly talk about it, because the modern stylist, because of the switches that are happening right now in the business, they're starting to get away from the photographer collaboration. And I think the next collaboration for us will be video and film directors and DPs, like working with directors of photography. So it is starting to change, but it's still very much like the lucrative business. You know, that all of my money right now, not all of it, a lot of it, I mean, what doesn't come from consultancies is working with photographers on ad shoots. So those relationships are still so important, so important. And creatively, you know, it's like they're capturing what we do. And you want them to be into it. And you want them to like be really and it's like, it's so much fun when you're working with someone who loves what you do. You know, and they're like, oh my God, that looks amazing. You know, when a girl comes out, they're like, oh my God, you look gorgeous, you look amazing. You know, and to the girl, and it's just like, you get all hyped up. But it's like, I have to give them the space to be that way as well. Does that make sense? Like, trust in them, and it's hard to trust them in the beginning. I was scared to death. It's like, I can't trust you with my precious pictures. This is my first story in pop. Like, really? But, you know, it's like I was working with all new photographers, and I trusted them and got some amazing things I still love. So, okay.